What is up, everybody? Welcome back. I hope you're having a great day. We've got a great video here. 3 videos in 1 week. I don't know the last time we have been on that kind of schedule, but as always, I'm Sam Fortney with our first ever repeat guest on the channel, Matt Murschel from the Orlando Sentinel. So nice to have you back here to talk some UCF football. As we know, a lot of spring games going on right now. We just had UCFs and UF, so we'll have to get to that eventually with a lot more coming this Sunday. But we do have a great video for you today. Just going to talk about the spring portal because that is what is the news right now. It's buzzing, it's open, and we'll go over that spring game and get some thoughts. Matt, thank you so much for having you on, for coming back on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I feel honored to be this returning guest. I mean, that says a lot. I have to, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit of UCF football. It's been an interesting, productive spring, for them, and getting ready for year two, going in year two in the Big 12.
Yeah, and the more the Big 12 continues to develop, whether it's just with the portal and teams losing their players, like Arizona, they've lost a lot of quality talent, and just seeing how the spring has gone for some of the other teams, the Big 12 just looks more and more open, really. I mean, outside of Utah, who's maybe, the top dog and in the conference right now, outside of them, this feels wide open. So UCF can very well fit right into that mix. But we did have their spring game, and we were talking a little before we started recording, and it wasn't the traditional spring game with the full 4 quarters. But regardless, we did get our first look at some of the new players, and especially KJ Jefferson. And I just want to hear your thoughts on what you saw in the game, what stood out to you, and maybe what was concerning.
No, I think what stood out to me is you mentioned KJ Jefferson. Obviously, a lot of eyes on him being the new quarterback, transfer coming in from Arkansas after he spent 5 years with the Razorbacks. He's a big guy. Everyone who spoke with all spring during camp, everyone reiterated he's a big guy. He's 6'3", he's 250. He's kind of fits the prototypical NFL mode, so to speak, mold when we look at like a player. He's got a strong arm. His ability to scramble a little bit. He was able to showcase a little bit in that spring game. He had 2 touchdown passes, looked good at times throwing the football. I could definitely tell there was a little bit of nerves, at the beginning of the game. You could tell that, obviously this is his first performance under at the stadium with UCF fans in the crowd. So, but otherwise he looks good. I think the offense looks good. There's other pieces that are going to be around him. RJ Harvey obviously is coming back, a guy who tailback who rushed for over 1,400 yards last year. He didn't play in the game. They held him out because they didn't want to risk injury. They had an opportunity to see some other guys who came in as well. Kobe Hudson, who's going to be their top receiver, he was also held out of the game. He spent most of the spring. He was limited because of an injury, so he wasn't able to be out there as well. But that was able to showcase some other guys like Xavier Townsend, and Trent Whittemore, some of the other receivers that they're kind of looking to lean on as well. And then I think the thing that really stood out to me about the game itself was the improvement on defense. We saw 9 sacks in the game. I know, again, spring game sacks, I always put an asterisk by them. They're not legit, so to speak, but most of those sacks were done by the linebackers. That's what stood out to me. 6 of them were done by the linebackers. And that's a key area where UCF really wanted to improve on. They wanted to be able to make sure that, the linebacking group is going to be better. That whole unit is pretty much brand new. They brought in a bunch of transfers, led by Ethan Barr, who came in from Vanderbilt. He was a captain at Vanderbilt's team last year. They brought Zaire Alexander from Idaho. He looks really good. Deshaun Pace looks really good from Cincinnati. They've got a lot of young faces in there as well. Secondary was strong too. Made 2 interceptions as well. So to me, that's the key for UCF going into the second season of the Big 12. Their defense has to get much better. The offense is going to put up points, but the defense to me has got to stop the run. That's been their key focus, and they got to be able to get turnovers and make plays.
Yeah, and the run defense last year, like you just kind of alluded to, it was abysmal. I mean, it was bottom tier. It was 122 in the country, I believe, out of like 130. So it was a lot. But defense is going to matter. You got Utah, who brings a good defense every year. Oklahoma State with Mike Gundy is going to bring a tough defense. I can't see Sonny Dykes having a bad defense for much longer. And then you got some other schools that just continually bring it. So that's going to be the biggest step up. It's going to be fixing up the trenches, and it's going to be getting the defense right to compete with a lot of these, bigger, stronger teams who have a little bit more experience in the Power 5 or Power 4 than UCF does. But KJ Jefferson, our first look at him in a UCF uniform, like you said, maybe a little bit of nerves. He does throw 2 touchdowns, throws some interceptions too. 12 for 22 on the passing. He looked good in my eyes, but of course there was some moments where you don't want to see a lot of interceptions in a spring game that's kind of designed for the offense to look good. For me personally, I didn't see a lot of concern, but was there any cause of concern for you, maybe from those interceptions?
No, not really. I mean, I think at times that one of them, I know he kind of pushed it into the end zone. He was trying to maybe like really kind of get the ball in to a tight space window, and the ball was popped up, and the defender made the catch. So it wasn't necessarily a straight on interception like he threw a defender. That's something that's really kind of to me, it scratched my head a little bit with the UCF the last 2 years. Is they've had a lot of those instances where a receiver would try to make a catch and it pops up and the defender makes the interception. And, they did that, had to happen to them a lot last year. So, I mean, that's definitely something that they have to work on with the receivers is making sure if they can't make the catch to either knock the ball down or, prevent it from kind of being up in the air so someone else can grab it. But otherwise, not really. I mean, I don't think there was that much of a concern in that front. I think your concern might be a little bit on the offensive line. Again, this is a line that has to replace 2 or 3 starters. They're brought in a bunch of transfers as well for there. They have a lot of guys who are coming back and returning. Uh, you know, 9 sacks, you say, oh my gosh, but again, spring game, you're rotating in different, second and third
Yeah.
team guys, trying to get them spot work. So honestly, when I looked at this team, I mean, I just feel like there's some areas where maybe they could get a little bit better. I think the receiver core is going to have to learn to make big plays. The tight end position is a lot better than it was. Randy Pittman has grown a lot at the tight end spot. He's a guy I think definitely put a lot of names. He'll get a lot of attention, next season. And then defensively, like I said, the secondary a little bit. I mean, they made 2 interceptions, so that was good for them. Defensive line made some sacks. They need to be aggressive. And as you mentioned earlier about the run game, that's why Gus Malzahn went out and brought back Ted Roof to be his
Yeah.
defensive coordinator. They've had a lot of history there. Ted Roof is known for producing really good run defenses, and I think that's what's been the focus all spring. In fact, that's the message they've told us over and over and over again. They've got to stop the run. So if those things can happen, I think they're off to a good start for the year.
Yeah, and when you look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the team from last year, that is the most glaring weakness. It was just, and maybe it's one of those welcome to the big leagues moment. It's kind of your
Mm-hmm.
introductory year, and you got ran on a little more than maybe you were expecting to, something like that. But it calls for the adjustments, and of course, they bring in this transfer class, the recruiting class, all this, and new staff looking to fix that run defense. So now that we've gotten through most of the spring practices and the spring game, what do you see as the remaining strengths and weaknesses of the team? I know you pointed out the O line and the run defense and the receiver core, but is there any other maybe glaring weaknesses that we haven't quite gotten a look at yet?
Well, I think it's always going to be down to depth. I think they always need to make sure they got plenty of depth where they can. Quarterback. We mentioned KJ Jefferson being the starter, obviously, but Timmy McClain, who was the backup, he was an
Right.
experienced
And now
backup who
he just
played
hit the portal.
last year. He just entered the portal, so really their backup to Jefferson right now is more than likely Dylan Risk, who was a true freshman last year, who the coaches have been high on, but really hasn't had any experience, he hasn't stepped on the field yet. So to play in a actual game situation. So does UCF go out and maybe go through the portal and find an experienced backup, that they can bring in there? Or do they rely on the fact that, okay, Dylan's going to be the guy? They got 2 incoming freshmen as well that they're really high on. Maybe they just kind of go that route. My guess is not. If I'm Gus, I probably want some experience back there just to make sure that if
Yeah.
something happens to Jefferson, we saw what happened to John Rice Plumlee last year. He got hurt,
He dealt with
in the
that his
second
whole
game.
career at UCF was
Yeah,
kind of injuries
yeah,
in and
dealt
out.
that with his career. He got hurt in the 3rd game of the season. He ends up having to kind of miss a bunch of time. They had to use Timmy McClain. So I think that's got to be a little bit of concern. That's a weakness maybe they have to look at. I also think they're probably going to look at maybe bringing in an experienced receiver at some point. I mean, they like Kobe Hudson, and they like Xavier Townsend. But after that, really, they got a lot of guys who've not had a lot of experience, game time experience. Guys who maybe been hit and miss or were used on special teams and things like that. So maybe another talented receiver could come in for them as well, and then even in the secondary as well. They've got some young guys who are eager and have done really well in the spring, and they feel like they're going to have opportunities to play, but they just lost one of their starting cornerbacks in Nakai Martinez to the portal. So maybe they look at bringing in some experience there. So I think depth is going to be the biggest concern for them, and making sure that everyone stays healthy. If they stay healthy and the offensive line is healthy as well, I think they can start out really well. I mean, you look at their schedule,
Oh
they
yeah.
open up against, an FCS school, and New Hampshire, and then they get Sam Houston State, and then they go on the road to TCU, and then they get a bye week before facing Colorado and then Florida. So, I mean, there's opportunities for them, early on that they could start and do a really good job. So it just remains to be seen.
Yeah, starting off hot is definitely going to be key before you get to those Colorado and Florida games. In a normal year, obviously, we just said Timmy McClain has the portal. Maybe if in a normal year, even with Plumlee, you would think about letting one of the young guys maybe back up that starting quarterback, and maybe he gets reps. Worst case scenario, if something happens. But when you get KJ and he's on this 1 year, and you're kind of in that win now mindset, I feel like you have to go at least do your due diligence. If there's maybe experienced older guys who are perennial backups in the portal, and bring one of them in just in case, because you just want that experience. You don't want to be thrusting a redshirt freshman, and when you're kind of in win now mode and you want to make the most of this schedule.
Yeah, it's and everything has changed.
Yeah,
When it comes to how college football is. Used to be you developed your quarterback, you recruited a freshman, you developed them, maybe you gave them an opportunity in year 2 or year 3 if you felt like that was fine. But nowadays, I mean, like you said, in a win now kind of mentality, you can't risk that. Maybe it's better off bringing in somebody who's a 1 year. You get him from 1 year, he's a backup. Then he's gone, and then you see what happens with Dylan. And if Dylan can kind of move forward, I think that gives him an opportunity maybe to step in there as well. But
yeah,
again, we're still about 12 days remaining in this portal, 12 or 13 days remaining in
yeah.
the portal. A lot can happen, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, true. Anything can happen. I mean, any day now, I feel like this portal can just totally explode. But throughout the course of the game and just really the spring practices in general, have there been any true freshmen from this latest 24 class, maybe early enrollees, that have kind of stood out to you so far?
Oh yeah. They've had a really good group of true freshmen that come in. Riddell Richardson has been getting a lot of attention. Jordan Bridgewater is a lot of attention. Both those two guys are receivers, young guys who were brought in. They're getting a lot of looks. Coaches and players have both talked about how they've stepped up and made big plays. They've got a offensive lineman that they have, like Walt Cliff Flynn, who's been running with the ones and twos during spring. He's been at center at one point, I think, during with the ones. I don't think he did that in the spring game, but he's been having a lot of looks there as well. Jason Johnson's a guy that they like as a defensive back. Christian Peterson, another defensive back they brought in that they really like. So they've had about six or seven of the early enrollees who they really have gotten opportunities to really work with the ones and twos. And that's something that Gus Malzahn has talked about. Is just they really wanted to do that. That's why it's so important for these early enrollees to get here, because they want them to get on the field and get opportunities to get in the weight room, get adjusted to the college game, and they're starting to see those things pay off. And I think that's been huge for them, because if you can get true freshmen to go out there and give you time and give you depth, that's something that's even though the portal's important, that's something they really want to
Yeah,
do. And so those are guys I think to look out. I also think Kylan Fox, who's a tight end that they really
that was a
like.
big
He's a
recruit.
big recruit, big tight end, a guy that they feel like they can move to the slot at times. They could use him as a receiver. He needs to develop a little bit on blocking, but Randy Pittman told us the other day he's a guy that he feels like can really be a difference maker as well. So they've done a good job of getting some playmakers and getting some guys on the defense they feel can help.
Yeah, and that's kind of the important part, really, when you're talking about stepping up kind of as that new Power 4 program into one of the more, perennial programs that are going to compete year after year. It's developing these true freshman classes, it's, recruiting and getting key contributors from that, even if it's just adding as depth in your first year, just players that if you need them, you can count on them. Regardless of what class you're in. But as far as the spring portal goes, we talked about how they're probably going to be a bit active and they have depth positions and other positions they want to fill. Are there any specific names that have entered that we should kind of look out for maybe
Not
UCF getting involved with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be some here or there. I mean, I haven't seen anything major, like they've they've thrown their name in a couple guys, but right now, it's been more about, I think, retention at this point. They're trying to keep as many of their guys as they can in there. Like I think I told you before that we started. They've got about 5 or 6 guys that are in
Yeah,
the portal right now, and really the biggest blow was Nakai Martinez. He was a starter cornerback. I don't think anyone was expecting him to go in the portal. We actually spoke to him a couple weeks ago, and he seemed excited about this upcoming season. So you're not really sure what happened there. If it's an NIL thing, if it's maybe he felt like there's other opportunities there as well. I think they'll look at some quarterbacks, like I said. I looked at the portal yesterday, and I think for them, they're going to wait and see kind of who's out there. And I think again, for receiver, maybe they'll look to see who keeps falling in. the hard part about the portal is you don't want to jump too soon
Yeah.
because there may be something someone who goes in the portal, day 2, day 3, day 4. So, but you also want to make sure that you're being active. So, I think there's some guys out there that they're probably going to keep an eye on, and I think you'll probably see some movement maybe the next week or two.
We talk about cornerback now that Martinez left being a position of need. If we look at Colorado, they just lost their 5-star cornerback,
Yeah,
who was a freshman, Cormani McLean. He was from Florida, I believe, committed to Miami and then flipped. Has made it kind of clear that he wants to be back in Florida. UF and FSU have kind of distanced themselves, really, haven't been in contact. Is that a potential? I know he's got some, maybe on/off
yeah,
the field issues, but is that a potential name that we could watch out for? Maybe UCF getting involved with? I know USF has been rumored at him because
yeah.
the guy who recruited him at Miami is now at South Florida. So is UCF maybe a team that could also get in the mix?
Yeah, for sure, and I think there's definitely interest, there as well. Again, how much interest? I mean, they're obviously looking for somebody, so they'll want to make sure they keep their options open. There are a lot. That's the interesting thing about the portal. There's a lot of players from the state of Florida who've gone on elsewhere, and a lot of players from Central Florida area. So I know UCF's been very active in trying to keeping those connections with those guys because they want to say, okay, if you're not happy where you're at, come on down and come play for us. I mean, and be closer to home. I mean, and it's really paid off. For instance, they got a transfer this offseason in Miles Montgomery, who was a backup running back at Cincinnati. And Miles is from Jacksonville, just up the road here. And he's told us several times that the reason he chose to transfer to UCF because he wanted to play closer to home. And he wanted to play for a team that was in a Power Four conference still and had opportunities. So there's a lot of those guys who are out there who maybe for other schools, like you mentioned, Colorado, Ohio State, somewhere else that maybe want to come back home, want to be closer to Florida, and decide maybe UCF's the place to go. I mean, a lot of it I think depends too on needs and on NIL if you get down to it, because that's really where a lot of the
Yeah.
the kind of made behind the scenes.
Yeah, I've definitely personally seen a lot of these cases so far where it's been these guys who maybe committed in class of 2023, redshirted, didn't like being away from home, were from Florida, now they want to get back. And, immediately the 3 teams they put on that list now are UCF, FSU,
Yeah,
and UF because they want to come home. And those are 3 schools that are usually in the area they're getting recruited from. So that I feel like that's a whole new kind of market really that's opened up when you're looking at potentially adding depth. A lot of interesting pieces come out. The USC offensive lineman, I might butcher his name, so I'm not gonna say that. But and then you got guys like Cormani, of course, who are all from Florida, class of 2023, didn't play a lot, and now want to come home. So those are kind of some names to keep an eye on. But Cormani especially because I feel like UCF is kind of in that school's range. Like I don't think he's going to a top tier major program right now. So I feel like he'd fit in good there when it's now especially a position of need. What are the other big position groups? Maybe we said, depth at quarterback and cornerback and pretty much everywhere you need depth. But are there any specific, maybe O-line, defensive tackle? I know that's at a premium. Any other positions that we could see getting addressed?
yeah, defensive end, edge rusher. They could always use an additional edge rusher as well. Again, one of the things that we've been talking about with the coaching staff that they learned from this past season in the Big 12 was, they just need guys they can rotate in and out. That's why depth was one of the main issues coming off that first season is they felt like they didn't have enough depth, and you could see it on the field. And so now I think what you're seeing is they're getting opportunities if they can get an edge rusher that they can throw out there in the portal, someone who can help them out right away. I think offensive line, again, they're always going to look for an offensive lineman. They'll look for someone who can step up. Last year, they had 4 different guys play center because of injuries and inefficiencies. So I think they'll always look for someone maybe that can be versatile, who can play a tackle or a guard spot, who can come in whenever they need someone to take a break. And if someone really good comes in the portal, then yeah, obviously you jump after them because maybe you can move them into the spots. So those are always going to be things to me. I think for UCF, it's almost basically those are needs, and then they're also looking who's the best available player because I think
Yeah.
you also want to think if we could get somebody a spectacular wide receiver or a running back or something, that we think that would be a 4 or 5 star guy, we'd love to get him on the team and see what happens. And that's kind of been their mentality.
Yeah, and there hasn't. I think it's different from kind of the winter or the December window because there's not a lot of like true star players kind of hitting the
Mm,
portal right now. It's more like the hidden gems, the high value role players. Maybe the only real star I can see is Damian Martinez, from
mm.
Oregon State who's hit the portal, but and maybe the defensive back from Arizona too. Um, but there's a couple. Last time we spoke, it was about we talked a lot about NIL and kind of how UCF has established their presence and have grown it. I know it hasn't been that long, but it just does feel like so long ago that we first spoke because it was really in the midst of this whole the winter window and stuff. Has there been any changes since the last time we spoke to the NIL presence? Is there maybe the strategy or the approach that the kingdom has taken?
Not I don't know if it was a strategy or approach. I mean, I just think they've been aggressive.
Yeah.
They got a big donor that gave money to the program a couple months ago, and he gave a $5 million donation to the football program, and they're putting his name on like the new upcoming football operations building they're planning on building. But he also gave $1 million to the NIL. And that's a big
Nice.
deal. Because
Yeah, that
that's
is a
money
big
that
deal.
you got to get that kind of money in and kind of help out. So that's the biggest thing they've had so far. They're working really hard at trying to continue to build the football side of it. But as I explain to people, it's not just football. They got a basketball program that first year in the Big 12, men's basketball, and they've been trying to get fundraising or NIL for that. I mean, they lost 5 or 6 players to the portal, along with 4 or 5 guys who graduated. So they're going to have to basically rebuild their roster, and that's going to require a lot of NIL situation there. Women's basketball is the same way. And so, all these other sports, they're trying to find ways to, fundraise as much as they can for NIL and get opportunities there. But football is the one that drives the engine. And I think
Yeah.
so far they've done a pretty good job of that. But again, I think for NIL, it's all about identifying your needs and then saying, okay, this is what we can afford, and let's see what happens.
Once you
Because
get football going,
yes,
it ends up fundraising everything else inadvertently because it just produces so much money because there's just such a large market for college football, especially in the South in the state of Florida.
yeah.
So I mean,
But
once
but
you
but
get
the
that
thing you have
going,
to work Yeah, the thing you have to worry about though about that is sometimes when you get donations for NIL, and this is what I've had people tell me behind the scenes, is sometimes they specifically want that donation to go to football. It's
yeah,
football
I'm sure
NIL,
that's
and
common almost.
and yeah, it's common, and so basketball wise doesn't nearly get as much attention. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So you have to go out and try to get people who are interested in basketball and fundraise for that. In the South, that can be difficult because again,
that's true.
football
It is
is
it is
the big
not as heavily
yeah.
catered to.
So, but football so far has done a good job, and they feel like they're in a good spot. Again, the rules keep changing with the NCAA and how they're
Exactly.
looking at things, so that could change as well. But they feel like they're in a good spot with the Kingdom. They're collective. Gus was heavily featured wearing a Kingdom jersey or Kingdom polo and hat after the spring game, so he does a lot of things. The spring game itself, the second half of the spring game, was a fan fest where fans could donate to the NIL collective to take part in the game. They could be an assistant coach, or they could kick a
Which is
field goal, or
clever.
they could, yeah, which is a great use of it. I think
Yeah,
that's what spring games are going to end up being more and more over the years, is finding ways to generate NIL money to help keep players there. And it's no
for better
secret
or
anymore.
worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse. I mean, it's no secret anymore. I mean, I tell people this all the time. I know people don't like NIL. A lot of people don't, but I keep telling them this is it. This is
Yeah,
until they get to the point where college sports becomes maybe possibly like like being an employee.
it
This is
it just
how it's
feels
going to
like
work.
that's the direction we're going in, and I mean, it's for me personally, I'm not a big fan of that, but it just feels inevitable at this point.
Yeah, and so to that point, I think you just have to continue to use the system that you have, and as much as it used to be that coaches didn't like it and would not talk about it, now they're more front and center about it than ever. Like I said with
Yeah.
Gus and his, he makes no secret that he needs people to donate to the NIL if they're going to win games, and so far they've done a good job of it, and I think they'll continue to work that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems promising. We talked last time how there's just so much
Mhm.
potential with such a large alumni base that you just got to give it some time in a big conference and things will get rolling eventually. One last question for you before we wrap it up here. After seeing, the spring practices and seeing these new players and everything that's developed since the last time we spoke, has it changed your outlook on the upcoming season at all? Maybe made you more optimistic, a little more cautious? Has it changed your outlook at all?
I don't know if it's changed my outlook. I mean, I felt going in after midway through spring, I really felt like this is a team that, as you mentioned earlier, because there's so many new teams in the conference, this feels like a year where UCF could contend right away. I mean,
Hmm.
they could be in the mix, for most of the season. I mean, their schedule works out really well for them. They're not on the road as much as they were last year.
That's
The
big.
home games are going to be big for them. Like I said, they get Colorado at home, they get Utah at home, they get Arizona at home. Those teams have had some changes in the offseason. So I feel like there's opportunities for them, this year. If they can stay healthy, if they can improve on their defense, I think they contend. I definitely believe they're going to be a winning program this year, and I definitely believe they're going to obviously get in a bowl game. But I think they contend. I mean, and again, if they can stay healthy, which has been key for them, and everyone does what they're supposed to do and not get in trouble, I think I think that they're going to
Yeah.
be right there. So um, it didn't change my opinion, but it did make me feel like okay, they're on a better foundation than they probably were last year.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I mean, I still feel optimistic when I look at them and their schedule and their outlook. I'm still like kind of locked into that 9-3 range, and even those those three, most of them are definitely winnable games between whether they drop one to an Iowa State or a BYU. I don't know, maybe a Colorado, Arizona. Whether it's because it's at home or because I just like the way this team is built. The three losses seems avoidable. I feel like they can even get to 10-2. It's gonna be, can you beat a team like Utah right now in your early power conference state? When you get them at home. I mean, maybe they're a little outmatched as far as head coaching goes because Kyle Whittingham is just one of the best coaches in the country, flat out. And Cam Rising in his 7th year, and KJ in his, I don't know if it's 5th or 6th, but that'll be two
It's
experienced quarterbacks going at it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one of those things where I feel like there's a lot of optimism around
Yeah,
this program
and
going
there should
into it.
be.
Yeah, there should be, and I think if everything goes like it should go for the off season, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll do a better job finishing games too as well. I spoke to the strength and conditioning coach a couple months ago. They've just kind of revamped that whole strength and conditioning
Yeah,
program, and one of their focuses was they got to learn to finish games, which they didn't do a very good job of the first year in Big 12. I think if they're bigger, stronger, faster, and we've seen that so far, I think they'll make the adjustment a lot better than they did last year. They were just outmanned at times, and you could tell the difference that they were a group of five school trying to make the transition to the Power
right.
Five. And now, I think they're much more closer to being that Power Four school than ever before.
Yeah, agreed. And some of it just comes down to, I like John Rice Plumlee, but whether it was just the fact that he couldn't stay on the field or a little bit of inconsistency when he was KJ, I think if you're getting 2022 KJ, he's just a better player. Like he brings a little more. He's just a little bit more dynamic. He's done it in the SEC. He's beaten big teams. He's kept it close with the Alabamas of the world, and he's done it. He's been there. So I feel like if you're getting him, that's just a dynamic playmaker who's just a level above JRP, and then could bring a whole new aspect to this offense as well. So it should be interesting to see.
Yeah, very much so. I agree, and I think that again, Jefferson is going to fit well into and listen, Gus knows what to do with big quarterbacks. We
Yeah,
saw
100%.
that KJ came to UCF was he liked the fact that Gus worked with Cam Newton, and Cam Newton is a very same physical stature and abilities that KJ has.
Yeah. So it should be interesting to see. I'm super excited for this upcoming season. Obviously, the first few weeks it's going to be hard to really get that excited because of the teams that they're playing, but the Colorado game and then the Florida game right after it are going to be two huge determiners for the rest of the season, and should be fun games to watch. UCF is definitely going to be one of the teams I pay a lot of attention to next year, and we'll see what happens in the spring portal. But Matt, thank you so much for coming back on. Like I said before, I really appreciate having you as our first repeat guest and taking the time out of your busy week with the portal and everything going on to come on the show.
No problem. Thank you. I appreciate it, and good luck. Let's connect some other time down the future.
Oh, for sure. We'll have to talk before the season starts or something.
Mhm.
Guys, remember, like the video, subscribe. Like I said, 3 videos this week. We've definitely been busy over here, and we've still got more to come with the NBA playoffs starting. So just stay tuned. We're doing our best. Subscribe, like the video, comment what you want to see more of, and I will see you all soon.